Oh, there were actually a couple of humps. The first hump was like the first 3 months, knowing I knew very little and having to be humble and extremely curious and going out and talking to customers, going out and talking to frontline associates, working on the front line, talking to our vendors, talking to everybody else across the company, and just learning about the company. I asked 3 questions. What are we great at? So let's keep doing that. What do we suck at? So let's stop doing that. And what should we do differently?
Welcome to Inside the Noise by Guitar Center, where we interview the artists, the leaders, and the innovators in the music industry. I'm Gabe Dalporto, CEO of Guitar Center. Let's go inside the noise.
Hey, it's Max from Guitar Center, and once again, to end our season of Inside the Noise, we're flipping the script a little bit. I come out from behind the camera and get to talk to Gabe about all the wonderful guests we had this season, some of the key takeaways, learnings, etc. I guess we'll call it. Gabe, just what a range of people we talked to this year.
What a season, and I can't wait to get into it, but there's a bunch of themes that kind of came out that during the pattern match over all the conversations we've had that I'm really excited to talk about.
Yeah, I think one of the first ones that jumped out to me was probably Jeff "Skunk" Baxter, who we've now spent quite a bit of time with in addition to the podcast episode. What a fascinating individual.
Wow. Yeah. Grew up as a guitar tech, guitars for Steely Dan, like a notoriously exacting band, Doobie Brothers. But that was just phase one, right? And then he goes and works with Roland and kind of creates these incredibly innovative, like synth guitars and modeling. And then he goes and works at the Department of Defense, all from a guitar tech. And I think like one of the things that I picked up on going back to David Call and last season, Skunk and a few others we're going to talk about is just how musicians, the ability to like improv and be creative, create really nonlinear thinkers. And the ability to go from playing to product design to defense design to reactors and putting all those pieces together and making step change nonlinear growth in all these different areas, I think is deeply ingrained in musicianship, improvisation, and the mathematics behind music.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially with Skunk. There's so often we think of like a left-right brain separation. He didn't really make that distinction, though. He kind of thought that they were very overlapping and didn't see the distinction, to your point, of like the science, the method behind improvisation.
That's right, because there's a lot of science there, but then, once you're really confident in the structure, then you actually can be completely creative and free.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I think he just, especially from, just playing with guitars, literally and figuratively from a very young age, just built up this fluency, this knowledge base that probably then took for granted 10 years later as he's playing with Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers, and that all that preparation really freed him up to that point to be artistic and express himself. One little tidbit I really enjoyed getting a little outside of that was he talked about, he spent a lot of time at Guitar Center Hollywood in the 70s in particular, and I think he had a session with Donna Summer coming up, and he's like, I don't have a guitar handy, because I think maybe it was the middle of the night or something. And he just walked in and just grabbed a $35 guitar out of a bin or something like that. And
it was like a junior guitar, and he walks in with Donna Summer, lays down a single track, and nails it. Yeah. And that's what you hear. Was it Hot Stuff? Yeah, that's what you hear on Hot Stuff, is a $30 guitar from Guitar Center, single take.
Yeah. Even adjusted for inflation, that's still pretty darn affordable, I think, all things considered.
I think so.
But yeah, I just, what an incredible person. And as we've talked more, especially about those Roland, Fender collabs, we'll call them, I guess, in the modern social media age, I think you've got one of these here, just like really thinking about how to solve problems for guitarists. For someone who might be a weekend warrior that might have one guitar at a time, or alternatively is playing at home, maybe not as appealing. But if you're a professional guitarist and you don't want to bring around 15 guitars to sessions, like, wow,
this thing is incredible.
Yeah.
And so it will model a Strat, a Tele, a Les Paul. It'll also model an acoustic guitar, it'll model a 12-string. And then you can do drop D tuning, you can do open G tuning, just all with the switch of a knob here. And so you walk on the stage and you basically have your entire arsenal. You don't need to walk with 12 or 5 different guitars, for your gig. It's all right here. Very cool. Skunk designed this with Roland in a Roland Fender collaboration. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah. Very kind of circuitous way to get where he is today. I'm sure it all makes sense in hindsight as you look over an incredible career like that, which kind of dovetails with another guy we spoke to, Thomas Tull.
Yeah.
I know our tagline is Legends Play Here. It just so happens he founded Legendary Entertainment, but that's probably what a lot of folks know him from, but that's only part of the story, really.
But going back to that through line, right? So I think what I see with Thomas is he's a musician, right? He plays in a band. He is actually open for the Rolling Stones, which is, unbelievable. But he's also a business person, and everything he's done, he's brought step change, innovative thinking. He takes like traditional old businesses and just radically changes them through that creative process. And the first thing he did was bought a laundromat and put in time of day pricing, right? And made that wildly profitable. Did a couple other businesses, started Legendary, and took data analytics, Wall Street financing, and brought it to the movie industry and produced some of the most incredible hits, of our generation. And now he's doing that through AI, where he's taking AI and applying it to other kind of more traditional businesses and looking for that step change. And I think that just goes back to the musicians are creative thinkers. They're looking for out-of-the-box ideas. And then he kind of links that to this notion of conviction. Right? Because, basically I'm like, look, you tried to start Legendary and everybody's telling you you're crazy and no. How did you stick with it? You're not from the industry. How did you have the courage? He goes, I saw, through data and analysis that I could disrupt this industry. And then I got conviction and I just stuck to it. And just having that creative thinking, analysis, and conviction together really is what I think it takes to start a company, but also persevere.
Yeah, and even, I think Skunk and Thomas are probably more alike than they might realize in that regard. You are yourself a musician, but you're also running Guitarcenter, 300 stores. And there's, I know just from some of the meetings I'm in, we have everything from staring at spreadsheets, but also wow, what a beautiful guitar, what a beautiful drum kit. And so you have to balance a lot of that stuff, right? Data, but also just this beautiful appreciation for art and craft and musicianship. Is any takeaways that you, thinking about them or even just some of the other guests, that you bring into your day-to-day at Guitarcenter?
I think part of what we're trying to do is learn from the past and the best of the qualities that got us here and make sure we're doing that well, but also take a giant step into the future. And we are leaning heavily into AI right now to radically change every part of our operations, both customer facing, but just internal operations, and making it much easier to run the company, much easier to serve the customer. And so, it's a bit of how do you bring disruption to a very backwards looking industry? And we're doing this also on the product development side. So we're developing right now a new internal guitar brand. And the challenge to the team is the last thing we need to do is copy another Telecaster, right? Fender makes great Telecasters. Why would you ever do that? They make great Telecasters. Go do something that's worth doing, right? And so part of it is be amazing at serving your customers and all those things that has made Guitarcenter great from the past, but also just thinking step change and what could be, and challenging the team here to think not just incrementally, but what is the big next step?
Yeah, and just speaking of that AI, one of Thomas's thing, I think TWG is the company that he works for. Yeah, his thing is if you're going to do AI as a company, you got to really fully embrace it. And I think probably for a lot of the musicians that are watching, when they're thinking of AI, they might be thinking more in the art side of it. Companies like Suno that are disrupting. And even many of our vendors who are not necessarily looking for AI to replace musicians, but how do they make their life a little easier, chord detection, repitching stuff. Machine learning that will really benefit their workflow.
Stem separation.
Stem separation, exactly. Yeah, and there's some very obvious use cases for AI in how we run as a business. What are some of the surprises for you as you've seen how the teams have been kind of making use of it? I know Rig Advisor is a really good example, but what's jumped out at you?
So I'll just give you one example. We have a really great lessons program that is running on really terrible software. And it's very frustrating for our customers. It's really, really frustrating in the stores just to be able to run the program because it's just so old and bad. We've been trying for 2 years to modernize that platform and have basically failed, made almost no progress. And I gave that team a challenge. Take 2 people. You have 2 weeks. You're not allowed to write a single line of code. You have to use only AI. And I want you to rebuild the entire platform from the ground up. And, after they changed their underwear, they set about work and they didn't think it was possible. And 2 weeks later, they were exhausted and they were elated because they'd done it. And if you think about how radical that is, that was like probably a multi-year project 2 years ago. They did it in 2 weeks. And what they said to me is, I never want to go back. I never want to go back to the old way. Yeah. And that's where we are like in the world right now is all the things that were impossible, not all, but many of the things that were impossible are now suddenly possible. And now you have to change the entire culture. We have, a lot of people here and you have to change the culture to now move into the future and embrace that. And it starts with one little project, one little catalyst like that at a time. And then the word spreads and then someone else is trying it. And then the word spreads, and all of a sudden you become a modern company that way.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that kind of probably sounds like an us problem that we're solving, but that has a downstream impact for our customers.
It's going to be amazing for our lesson students. I mean, it's going to be so much easier for them just to work with us. It's going to evolve into the content they're getting and the ability to work, at home for the other 6 days and not just in the lesson days. So it's really going to unlock a ton.
Yeah. So there's a huge downstream impact from this thing that might have just started as we need to fix our software for us.
Yes.
And that gets to the customers and we'll make it better. Thomas and Jeff, just such very, very specific individuals. And again, building on what you talked about with Dave Colt and having that musician's mindset. I'd be remiss if we, of course, didn't talk about one of Thomas's biggest things, which was kind of the brainchild, more like the fan that made It Might Get Loud happen, which, someone who has to make content and stuff all the time in this industry, that was, kind of the start of that, frankly. Get a bunch of guitarists in a room to talk about guitar and why it's so special.
I love
cool.
It Might Get Loud. Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Page, Jack White, The Edge. First of all, so different, but brilliant, each of them, right? And then having them just talk and riff and talk about their journeys and play together, it was amazing. I think Thomas called it his homage to guitar or something like that. Yeah. And that was something he did out of love, right? He wasn't looking for commercial success there. It's just his love of music, his passion for music. And, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I remember 20 years ago walking out of the theater and being just absolutely blown away. And again, I imagine most of our viewers remember that too. Just an incredible love letter to the guitar.
A love letter to the guitar is what it was.
Best way to put it. There was just such a range of people. I mean, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, kind of, but not really. An artist like Yvette Young, who she's been a longtime friend of Guitar Center. Yeah. I think 6-7 years we've been doing great stuff with her. And wow, what a very different mindset, approach. I don't know what the right word is to guitar and playing it. And yeah,
that was the most emotional, raw and honest interview we've ever had.
Yeah.
I asked her before the interview, it was like, is there anything I can't ask you? And she said, no, I'm an open book. Yeah. And she was an open book. She started playing classical piano, was kind of in that super high-end competition scene of young young kids, and was just grinding, and then had a breakdown, and like literally was hospitalized, and didn't play music for quite a while, and then refound her love for music from guitar. And I think she said her quote was something like, "Guitar saved my life."
Yeah.
And it was finding love of music on your own terms, and then following that love as opposed to the grind, the expectations, the pressure, the whatever, that really allowed her to become a generational guitarist. I mean, as you listen to her play, just the innovation, the technique, I mean, she is spectacular. Yeah. But she's doing it on her own terms. She's bringing a lot of that classical training in. Yeah. And then she's bringing a lot of her own innovation in. So I thought that was such a great lesson. And I just personally, I don't want to compare my situation to hers, but every time I've had hardship in my life, I turn to guitar, right? And I turn to play, and that's how I deal with hard things. That's my therapy, right? It's operating. It moves you out of the rational linear world into the much more emotional world. And so, she, I think, had a great message.
Yeah, and she kind of became an accidental public success in that regard. She was just playing guitar, and I think she was our teacher at the time. One of her students said, "Hey, have you ever thought of putting a video on the internet or something like that?" Right? And all of a sudden, she's putting videos on the internet, and now she can actually make a living as a musician, which is pretty wild.
She has not only a living, she has 2 signature guitars. She's got a signature pedal that she built. Yeah. And kind of going back to the art teacher, she said, one of the hardest things to do is like, what is that canvas for creating sound and music? And so she designed that pedal to be your starting point canvas for, exploring sound. And I thought that was such a great connection to her passion and, her as a kind of a teacher and a mentor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I saw recently she made some content where I don't remember who she was partnering with, but reinterpreted a classic Beach Boys song, "Wouldn't It Be Nice?" and did it in a different style of music. And I remember she posted it, and in some of the content she talked about how she hadn't really listened to the Beach Boys much beforehand. And all these comments in social media saying, "How could you not know the Beach Boys?" She's like, "Oh, I come from a different background. I was a pianist. I came, my parents were immigrants in this nation." And she just brings such a different perspective in how she approaches it. You were talking about how she plays, and just watching her hands, she plays differently. Because she also played violin too growing up, I think it was. And the way that she frets, as a lifelong guitarist myself, I'm watching, I'm like, how do you get into that? How do you do that? I know how she does it, but it's really incredible. Just such a fresh take on the instrument and fresh perspective. And I think it's kind of interesting and cool that she doesn't have necessarily all the cultural touchstones and musical touchstones that people might take for granted here as growing up as a guitarist, and she's instead able to bring all that incredible rich classical perspective.
Yeah, so like another through line here that I think we've heard last season and this season and kind of looked around is the world is composed of gatekeepers, people saying yes or no to you, right? Yeah. Can I have that job, yes or no? Can I act in this movie, yes or no? Like, will you promote my album? Will you allow me to do this? Yeah. And the internet has really turned that upside down. Yeah. And, Blu DeTiger was another example where you now have artists who can do amazing work and put it on the internet. And if it resonates, there's no gatekeeper. Right. Like, they are their own gatekeepers. And it happened with Yvette, it happened with Blu, it happened with many, actually other guests on kind of slightly different axis, where they've created their careers organically and went right past the gatekeepers.
Marty Schwartz,
for
Schwartz, example.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of the world's guitar teacher or the world's internet guitar teacher. I'm not sure what the right.
So Marty Schwartz, let's talk about Marty. Probably the biggest, most influential guitar instructor in the world, has probably individually done more for mentoring the next generation of musicians than any other single person. also just a great person, an incredible energy. Such just simple lessons from him, like 5 minutes a day. That's all you got to do. Just do 5 minutes a day. If you're going to learn an instrument, it's just that repetition, that habit. Now, he knows if you play 5 minutes a day, good chance you're going to play 10. And if you play 10, there's a good chance you're going to play 15 because it's fun, But it's really just getting into that routine, that habit. And you kind of like, you think about the habit, you think about, how musicians become great. You think about the Beatles. Now, they weren't playing 5 minutes a day, they're playing 10 hours a day, but they were learning the same way he teaches, they were learning through songs, right? So they weren't maybe taking the classical theory classes. They were playing tons and tons of covers, playing 10 hours a day, gigging constantly. And then from that became true masters. And, I think Marty's whole perspective is just get into the routine, learn to play the stuff you love, and then all the theory will kind of follow from it.
There was another little interesting thing he talked about, which anyone that's picked up a guitar, especially bass, can really identify with. He talked about getting over that initial hump, the callous period, right? The like, oh God, this,
I remember
this
that.
is awful. Which I mean, that's certainly a meaningful lesson for most hard things in life. As you think about even your time at Guitar Center now, I think coming on 3 years, maybe, give or take,
2.5, coming up
3. Yeah. What I know for you, obviously, you're drinking from the fire hose for however long as you're initially coming here. Yeah. What was that hump like for you? And being on the other side now, how has that changed for you?
Oh, there were actually a couple of humps. The first hump was like the first 3 months and just like knowing I knew very little. And having to be humble and extremely curious and going out and talking to customers, going out and talking to frontline associates, working on the front line, talking to our vendors, talking to everybody else across the company, and just learning about the company. I asked 3 questions. What are we great at? So let's keep doing that. What do we suck at? So let's stop doing that. And what should we do differently? And then that kind of came to a really clear articulation of like what we have to do to be great for our customers. And we called that our strategy. And so that was hump 1, was just like getting over the learning the business and then focusing everybody on what we have to do. But actually the bigger hump was, how do you take that and change behaviors every single day in every single store? And change behaviors every day, around this office and around the country, and build that momentum. And that was the hard part. That was the thing that took months and years, was just like, now we knew the direction, but just like training everybody to row in the same direction, and getting that execution down. That was a big hump. And I feel like that execution is really, you can feel it moving now, right? We're all going in the same direction. Like we're executing better. Our customer satisfaction scores are way up, just way up. We're highly unsatisfied with where we are. I think we can be way, way better than we are, but you can feel it. And so this is when it becomes, I think, a lot more fun, is after you get over that hump of just like deciding what you're going to do and getting that progress going.
Yeah, I think one of the episodes that kind of typified that then versus now was sitting down with Phil McKnight, who I know you had sat down with him earlier that day, and I guess about a year or so ago. And Phil, to his credit, kind of no holds barred guy, and
absolutely
very. I think part of Phil's success is, he comes certainly from an informed background on the business side of this, but also more importantly speaks for a large swath of the customers. And what was it like getting to reverse the conversation, sitting down and learning more about Phil?
Well, what I love about Phil is he's made a career around being brutally honest. And it turns out that like a lot of the content out there on musical instruments is paid. And so it's totally biased, right? And so you can read all the reviews. You don't know what's honest, what's not honest. So you don't really know. And Phil is just by God honest. And it turns out that like people love that. And he's built a really popular channel just literally disassembling guitars, putting them back together, trying them, and telling you the truth about them. And he's also honest with his audience. And so a little over a year ago, he asked to interview me. And so he interviewed me, and he asked a lot of really hard questions. And at the time, like, Guitar Center wasn't operating at the level we needed to operate. And I was really honest with him about where we weren't doing that. And then we scheduled this more recent one where he interviewed me again. But 2 weeks before, he basically like had a 2-hour attack video on Guitar Center and the new guitar project and everything. I'm like, oh, Phil, come on. But we had a good conversation, and it was totally great. And I just love the fact that like he is just like true and sticks to his guns. And so he's a person of very high integrity. So I was just like, now I get to nail you. What am I going to ask you? But actually, it wasn't like that. It was actually a really great conversation. We got to explore a little bit of his history and background. He started a bass company. He's a bass player. It failed. He had all these production problems, and from sourcing in China, and he kind of struggled a bit until he really fell into this current, and this was the internet allowing him to say yes to himself, right? This job didn't exist. There was no job posting. There was no one to like hire him. He just had this passion, and he started to post things on his channel on the internet, and it started to grow and get a following. And then he realized, like, I can make more money doing this than I can. I think he was running a guitar store at the time. And he created a career for himself, just being like, totally honest. So I just thought it was such an inspiring story of saying yes to yourself. But also, great opportunity to have, really, really honest conversations.
Yeah. He's truly his authentic self, which
for sure.
Well done, Phil.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We've actually been really overwhelmed by the response so far, so thank you for that. We have also noticed that a lot of you haven't subscribed yet. We have incredible guests coming up. I'm not even allowed to tell you who they are, but trust me, you don't want to miss this. So hit subscribe. That way you don't miss an episode. Now back to the program.
One of the through lines we've talked about that is that guitar project. And we talked to some really incredible builders and innovators this season. We had Andy Powers at Taylor, a company pretty much founded on the premise of how do you make the acoustic guitar more playable. Yeah. An incredible engineering mind, but also wonderful player. We talked to Brian Ball. Ernie Ball was founded on the notion of we need to do this better for electric guitars. We need better strings. And, he invited his friend Tosin Abasi, who's to talk about his signature guitar, the Kaizen, which I think translates roughly to continuous improvement, right, give or take.
Yeah.
Thinking about the conversations you had with them, what jumped out at you, especially as you've gotten to know Brian and Andy better over the past few years?
Yeah, I've gotten to know both of them, and I really like both of them. They're just great humans. Yeah. Andy is a builder. Like, he is a builder. Like, my wife tells me I'm over hobbied. Like, I like to surf, I like to play guitar, I like to do other stuff. So I actually went surfing with Andy, and I'm surfing with him thinking, this is fun, right? And I'm like, Andy, like, how big waves are you comfortable? He's like, I used to surf 4 times overhead, but my wife says I can't do that anymore, so I only do 3 times overhead. I'm like, oh, you're a real surfer. Yeah. Like, that's serious. He also builds surfboards. He rebuilds antique cars. And he's the best guitar builder probably in the United States. He's the CEO of Taylor, but he is also the best acoustic guitar builder in the United States. And Taylor was founded on innovation in service of a problem, which was acoustics were just kind of hard to play. And it was a much lower action. It's just a more easier to play guitar. Andy, has a great story about it. It was a blown out surf day. He's staring at the waves. He can't go out, and he has this great epiphany on how waves kind of propagate and sound propagates, and redesigns the entire internals of the Taylor guitars, and that's what you see today. And then so it sounds better. And then he had this other epiphany of like, if it gets a little more humid or a little different temperature, all of a sudden the action on your neck changes a little bit because this thing's organic material and expands and contracts. And they just launched a a new product line where you can actually just go in there and very simply adjust the neck and the action on the neck, and 20 seconds later it's playable again, right? So here's a person who is a builder at heart that is innovating for the sake of the customer, not for the sake of innovation. And Ernie Ball's the same thing, right? So like Ernie Ball started as a string company when the only string companies were making like thick, heavy gauge strings, and the electric guitar had come out, and not everybody wanted these heavy strings. People wanted to be able to bend and to do different things, and no one would do it. And so they started the company to do that. Then you think about the innovation they've brought to guitars. I've got a John Petrucci Majesty. Oh my God, that thing is just crazy. It's got both a piezo, so it can sound acoustic-ish, to humbuckers with coil tapping, so I can sound like a single coil, a humbucker, or an acoustic. It's got a push-button boost. Like it is basically like a Swiss Army knife I can take on stage, and I don't need all these other guitars and stuff, and it's just incredible quality. And Tosin, he's taking it further with like the fan frets and his own Kaizen projects, along with what he's doing with Ernie Ball. So it's just really exciting. Another theme would be innovation, not for the sake of innovation, innovation for the sake of solving real problems. And I feel like Taylor, Ernie Ball, like they nail that.
Yeah, and even going back to like D'Addario last year, these are companies that I think as musicians, there's a lot of things that we take. I hate to say take for granted, that's not the right way to put it, but we accept that this is how a guitar feels, or this is what a cable does, or this is, and they're innovating and pushing forward areas that you didn't realize needed to be pushed forward and solving problems.
Because like the initial problem is like it gets solved, and it's like, okay, now there's this thing called a capo.
Right.
And you're like, okay, good enough. Except for like if the spring tension is too high, you put it on, it knocks it out of tune. Right. And so like how do you dial that in and make it easier to put on and off and really dial in the pressure so it's exactly what it needs to be, and you don't have to retune your whole guitar, right? So it's things like that, is that continuous improvement of how do you not accept good enough, and how do you like look for awesome, great, perfection, whatever you want to, there's no perfection, but like really high satisfaction. And so, D'Addario for sure, Ernie Ball, like I just love visiting and seeing the changes, the evolutions that are coming through. Some really great stuff. I mean, we kicked off the season, Adrian Young of No Doubt, our partner in OCDP, but also Adrian Young of No Doubt. That was pretty cool. So I was hoping he would do a naked stage dive, but he declined. With Adrian, I think like the interesting story was maybe two takeaways from that. Number one is how insecure he felt when he was auditioning. And then how after he got the job with No Doubt, he was really pushing himself to get better every day so he could feel confident. The other thing I would say is it was an overnight success story that took 6 years, right? And when you see someone kind of pop on this, the radar, like when Tragic Kingdom came out, you think, oh my God, yeah, it's great. They must have just formed this band. They were grinding it out. Like they were in the Southern California punk scene and, trying to get beyond just local gigs and trying to really find their sound. And it took them many years. They were just grinding, trying to get better, trying to, to break through. And then they finally nailed it, and, and it kind of exploded. So I thought that was like a great story of perseverance, of just like driving yourself to get better every day, but then perseverance to stick with it until you finally have your moment.
I think Adrian was truly a little bit of the fake it till you make it, and gusto, I think, is a good way to put it. He had gusto, and he was like, I'm going to do this, and the perseverance, to your point, that takes. And even Tragic Kingdom was not, he talked about it wasn't just like hey, go record this album for 2 weeks, which is kind of what happened a lot at the time with, the major label system at the time. It was, I think, a year and a half. They were like at 15 different studios in all throughout LA and
trying to find studio time.
In between gigs, in between their lives, right? And then it got finished, and then holy smokes, it was everywhere. I remember when that album came out and blew up, and it was just enormous. And here we are, and I don't know how many years later, 30 years later,
And they just played.
the Sphere. Yeah, he's like,
amazing.
what a dream. Gets to play the Sphere, gets to run there. We bring OCDP back, which he's been such a huge part of. Him and Daniel really making sure that the drums are as good as they are, and really a sign of the culture of the community. Warped Tour is back, something that is very adjacent to No Doubt, obviously, and that culture in the Southern California music scene. I know we're partnering with them as well, and Ernie Ball for the Battle of the Bands. So it's really, I think, a pretty exciting time probably for Adrian. We were with him, I think maybe back in February, shortly before OCDP launched, and it was interesting because you'd seen, we got to work with him in his home studio, and you saw this guy that, No Doubt's still No Doubt, but they hadn't been doing it like they were 25 years ago. And you saw Adrian the person, and 2 months later they're playing the Sphere, and I see Adrian the rock star, and what an incredible time for him and the entire band, I think. Just really, really great. Another wild story, Trey Hensley, who we worked with so much for Acoustic Month here at Guitar Center this June. I kind of an overnight success. I mean, 6 months in, as an 11-year-old who's playing at the Grand Ole Opry, if I'm getting my memory right here.
I mean, I went to the Grand Ole Opry year and a half ago, and you kind of get goosebumps just being there. I mean,
it's one of those places, right?
It's one of those
it when you walk in.
legendary stages, and he had just started playing, and he gets to perform. I mean, my God! First of all, obviously the guy is immensely talented. So, but think about like the pressure he must have felt. It was great to kind of talk. He's also the world champion of bluegrass,
right?
And an incredible performer. And so he actually did a little performance for us. Just mind blowing, the amount of technical skill, but also musicality. So it was really exciting to have him on, and just a really, really nice guy.
Yeah, when you work with a lot of guitarists that have that skill level, and just like it falls out of them, and there's just no bad take. It's not like, hey, I need another take. It's just, which one is the best, right? There was not one bad take anytime we worked with him. When he'd pick up the guitar, it just flows out of him. And it's really interesting seeing his partnership with Taylor. He plays in a music scene that is long associated with some of the classics, I think. And he talked about that growing relationship with Taylor, just how blown away he was by what they were doing, his time spent with Andy in particular.
Well, we just got to see Trey and Andy play.
Just at the meeting.
Just recently, we had all of our store managers together for the first time in 12 years, and Andy and Trey, graced us with their presence, and they just sat up there for 25 minutes and jammed together, and it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Andy, which I also didn't mention, is a spectacular guitarist, and the two of them going back and forth, trading leads, playing bluegrass, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. Just two of them. If Andy wasn't the CEO of Taylor, just being the guitarist he is, he'd be exceptionally successful.
Yes.
So, Dave Maddux, probably one of my favorite coworkers throughout Guitar Center. We got to spend a little bit of time with him recently. We were at the Hollywood store digging into some vintage guitars, and then we sat with him in the repair area. Wow, what a career he's had.
That was just a history lesson, and really a history lesson around Fender. He started at Fender right in the beginning of the 70s, right after CBS bought them. He saw basically what happens when a corporation runs a music company, and it's not pretty. Yeah. I think his take was anytime they could save a penny, they'd save a penny, and quality wasn't a concern. And you went from this iconic company that was built the first production electric guitar in the world. Invented the Telecaster, invented the Stratocaster, and then just saw it kind of wither to a shell of what it was. And then he was part of the turnaround when the company was bought back from CBS. He was one of the few employees kept to move the factory to Corona and start fresh. And they started off with making a couple of instruments a day. Yeah. And scaled it from there, and the number one thing was quality. Yeah. And they just focused on quality, started to rebuild the production, but really rebuild the brand. Make sure every single guitar came out was like had incredible feel and playability, and built Fender into like the icon, back into the icon that it is today, with much higher quality. He trained most of the master builders at Custom Shop. He opened the Mexican facility and built the first guitar in the Mexican facility. Yeah. So he kind of saw the Fender kind of at the peak of their heyday, the decline and the rebirth, and had a significant role to play in what Fender is today. So I thought that was just a fascinating story. Then he has these incredible other stories where he became the repair person for people like George Harrison. Yeah. And if you ever saw the movie Get Back, which if you haven't, you have to see Get Back, the final concert the Beatles ever play was on this rooftop in London, and he's playing this Telecaster, Rosewood Telecaster. So it's just like the most iconic concert in history, this iconic guitar, and George Harrison, brings it in for repair, and Dave gets to repair it, and he secretly signs his name on that guitar. And now, George doesn't know this.
Sends it back.
Sends it right back, and but repaired it. So, incredible stories there. And now he's working at Guitar Center, and he leads our Hollywood repairs organization. Vintage, and Eric Clapton has come to him. Any famous musician, he is the guy, because he has grown up building these guitars. He is one of the best guitar builder techs in the world, and I think just a living legend, and someone we're just really honored to be able to work with.
Yeah, every time I get to encounter him, just the stories, the insights, just an incredible guy. And even that day, I remember we pulled Eric Clapton's Blackie out of the case that day, and there was having a little bit of an issue.
It wasn't working.
Yeah, it wasn't working. These things happen when guitars are 60, 70 years old. And, that guitar is worth a little bit of money. Yeah. And rightfully, everyone would be very precious about it. Dave's probably touched a few thousand Strats in his day. I'd guess probably more than a few. He grabs it, brings it upstairs. 5 minutes later, it's working perfectly.
It was amazing. And it was so good.
one of the things that struck me about Dave is, as far as he is in his career after 40 plus years at Fender, all the incredible vintage instruments he's gotten to repair at the Hollywood store and kind of bring back to their glory, it'd be very easy to see this as a piece of wood. And he still has that joy for the magic in certain instruments. I remember he showed us a picture of, he's got Eric Clapton's prototype first signature guitar, and he talks about it with such pride and joy. And I think, 40, 50 years into this industry, he still looks at these instruments as, they do have magic in them sometimes. And, we should all be so lucky, because it's very easy to take for granted that it's some wood and glue and screws and electronics.
And he really connects with the emotion of it.
Yeah.
And we were also talking about the vintage instruments. There is just something about a vintage instrument where you almost feel the people who've played it before you. You almost feel the stories.
They've got stories in them.
Yeah. And so there's metal, there's wood, but there's stories, there's emotion. There's passion, it all live within these things.
Yeah, I mean, if any of you watching this ever find yourself at the Hollywood store, if you see Dave, do say hi. He's one of the best, wonderful stories. Goodness, what a range of people this season.
It was fantastic. In a pretty diverse range, from the builders to the artists to like the innovators. It is an incredible group of people. All of them totally inspiring. Their stories are worth hearing. So I encourage you to go back if there's any episodes you missed. It's worth it. Trust me, they're all just fantastic stories.
Well, Gabe, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're a busy guy. That was season 2.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it. And don't forget to subscribe. Season 3 is just around the corner. You don't want to miss any of these episodes. Push the button.